Next Chapter Podcasts.
Ready to launch your business? Get started with the commerce platform made for entrepreneurs. Shopify is specially designed to help you start, run, and grow your business with easy customizable themes that let you build your brand, marketing tools that get your products out there, and that's just the beginning. From startups to scale-ups, online, in person, and on the go. Shopify is made for entrepreneurs like you. Shopify, your all-in-one commerce platform.
Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com.au/listen.
Ready to launch your business? Get started with the commerce platform made for entrepreneurs. Shopify is specially designed to help you start, run, and grow your business with easy customizable themes that let you build your brand, marketing tools that get your products out there, integrated shipping solutions that actually save you time, from startups to scale-ups, online, in person, and on the go. Shopify is made for entrepreneurs like you.
Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/setup.
Hi, I'm Michael Goodfriend. I'm the head of scripted fiction at Next Chapter Podcasts, and I'm the executive producer of the Play On podcasts. Okay, there is a podcast series I need you to hear. That's the first time I've said that, right? Usually I say, there's a podcast I know you're going to love, or I want you to listen to, or something like that, but this one is different. I need you to hear this. Some series are entertaining, some are inspiring or enlightening, but every once in a while, and it's very rare, but there is a series that feels like it's our duty as citizens of the world to hear, because it sheds light on something that touches all of us, that humanizes an issue or an experience that we otherwise tend to gloss over or push away because we've heard too much about it. It's old news. We've become desensitized to it. It's too hard. I get too much to go. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to understand or relate to it because I just don't think it matters. New York-based not-for-profit theater company Houses on the Moon and playwright Jeffrey Solomon created a documentary play called NOVO. It recounts the life and death of a Guatemalan teenager named Edgar Chocoy, who was deported after a failed asylum bid in the USA and murdered by the very group he testified would execute him were he to be returned to that country. With the help of the New York City Council, they've produced an audio adaptation of NOVO, which tells the story in 3 potent half-hour episodes. Edgar's heart-wrenching story is told through real-life court transcripts and interviews that shed light on the plight of unaccompanied alien minors and the human rights issues they face. And of course, it's taken on a new urgency in this time of, we could say it's unprecedented, this backlash against refugees. Sadly, it's not unprecedented. It's part of our DNA in the United States. It's part of our history. It's why you need to hear it. It's a powerful educational tool, this play, this series, that literally brings to life a story that you might otherwise not want to know about. And it's a way for immigration and health professionals, students, policymakers, and us, the public at large, to learn about and understand and, yes, empathize with the people that we're talking about when we use words like mass deportation. So I'm here with the author of NOVO, Jeffrey Solomon, and a friend of mine who happens to be an actor in the series, Zulema Guevara. Jeff is a solo performer and a playwright. He's been seen in solo works that he's created all over the country and that have toured even across into other countries around the world. He's based in New York. He's based in Los Angeles. And he's received a Joseph Jefferson nomination for Best Actor in Chicago. He's done diversity training at colleges and universities and houses of worship and even corporations through the work that he's created. He's won lots of awards for the work that he's done, and he's here with us to talk about his play. Zulema is an Obie Award-winning actress who's been based in New York City. Uh, she's done work all across the country as well. She's been seen in films and television shows. And they're both here to talk about this play that you can listen to. You're going to get the first episode in our feed, the Play On feed. And before you hear it, I thought it would be great to get these two artists together in the same room to talk about how this play developed and became a part of their work. I want to start with you, Jeff. Can you take us through the sort of the genesis of this project, how you started working on it? What was the journey into this play for you?
With my theater company, Houses on the Moon, which really has a heartfelt mission to tell untold stories, I became very interested in the issue of asylum for LGBTQ refugees fleeing persecution and did a lot of research. I would say that's true of all our pieces, deeply researched, 2 or 3 years of research and partnership with communities. And at that time, Emily is the artistic director and co-founder of Houses on the Moon Theater Company. We spent a lot of time in immigration court. And as a citizen of the United States, I had no idea what the court really does in our name. But right up there on the wall is, the emblem of, the United States of America. You see that eagle, and this court is supposed to be an extension of us. And I had no idea. And Emily and I thought, as a follow up to Terrace Crossing, which was the piece about LGBTQ asylum, why not do a documentary piece? Why not just bring people directly into this court and use only, do verbatim, use only those words? And so we began, at the time, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had determined that many mistaken judgments were being made and people being deported to countries because of the sheer volume. So we put out a national call, a search for a case that was worthy of a second hearing, if not by the court, then by the public, who the court represents. And we got dozens and dozens of contact from lawyers and refugees, and but wound up with this case about Edgar because it was the most kind of egregious case of the system gone wrong. And at the same time, sadly, it's not singular. I reached out, I met with Edgar's lawyer, and with his mom, and it was their passion to have this story told, in some form that's how we decided on that specific case of Edgar Chikoy.
This is all a true story. It's all verbatim from transcripts and things that actually existed in the case itself, in Edgar's case.
Yes. So just quickly in a nutshell, Edgar's mom came to work in the United States when he was just a baby and left him behind, an impossible decision, but in order to feed him. And he grew up with very little family support, and by 10 was involved in some way with gangs by 10 or 12.
In Guatemala?
In Guatemala City, yeah. And when he got a glimpse of a different life and wanted something different, and tried to leave the gang, put a green light, a hit on his head, and was going to execute him. And at 14, his mother arranged for him to come to the United States and cross the border with a guide, with a coyote. And he wound up in immigration custody and deportation proceedings, and that this asylum case was born. And he said to the judge, like, if you send me back to Guatemala, they're going to kill me. And in fact, that is what happened. 17 days later, he was murdered by Marcelo Chucha, the gang that he had fled. So the play, all the text from the play is from immigration court transcripts, interviews with the key stakeholders, such as Edgar's mom, Margarita, his lawyer, Kim, his gang counselor, Santiago Sanchez, and other documents that are part of his asylum case, psychiatric assessments, news reports. All of it is pieced together to tell this story.
I want to ask you, Sulema, about Margarita. What did you learn about her in your work as an actress, getting into this character, are you able to understand her decision and empathize with her choice, I don't know what led to her choosing to leave her infant son behind in Guatemala?
I was able to actually speak with Margarita. I heard all of the interviews, and after years of having performed the play, I was blessed to be able to perform for her. And I was able to have conversations with her, and she had lost her husband. She had two sons. It wasn't just Edgar. She had he and his brother, and there was no way for her to provide for them in Guatemala. She just couldn't do it. And the only option that she felt she had was to come to the States and to leave her children with her parents, which is it's an impossible choice, but many women make it. We a majority, I would say, of the women that come over the border by themselves that have children are doing it because they don't feel that they have any other choice. And I think that's an important piece of the conversation that's always left out. You know, when we talk about immigration, no one leaves their country of origin and makes that trek, which is very difficult, wrought with a lot of pitfalls. It's very dangerous. Nobody does it unless they feel that they absolutely have to, especially if they're leaving children behind. And if you speak to her, that was what she said. And as a parent, I can completely understand that. I don't think that there's anything that I wouldn't do to be able to feed my children if that were the situation that I found myself in. So yeah, I can totally empathize with her. Um, it was hard. It was very, very difficult for her.
What was it like to perform in front of her? I assume you met with her after the performance. What was her reaction?
It was hard, because of course whenever you're performing as someone and that someone is in the audience, you're never going to be able to like be them. So obviously we look different, we carry ourselves differently. um I think I wanted to portray her as honestly and as vulnerably as I could, because I think that's the most important thing about Margarita. She was just very vulnerable. um and she still felt, in part because, not in part, I think in whole, because the text is taken from the court transcripts as well as his lawyer's transcripts and interviews with his lawyer and his gang counselor. She felt judged,
Mm.
and I think that is a natural byproduct of seeing it from the point of view of the court. um so, and we talked a lot. She felt that her story, the pain that she went through actually having left them, was not as in the forefront as Edgar's plight. We do go through in the play, we do hear from Edgar, we hear about how he felt. And there is a monologue in there where she does talk about why she left him, but obviously the story is not about Margarita. So it's really difficult to get the complete picture of what she was experiencing. It's a lot more complex and a lot more nuanced, I think, than the play itself can give her time for.
Is she living in the United States now?
She is. She lives in California. She lives in LA. Um, she lost two more sons after Edgar. One of them also to being executed in Guatemala
Mm.
after having been deported, and another one just recently. So she's had a really hard life, a lot of pain.
Jeff, in your research and in developing this story, did you learn about what causes people to want to leave Guatemala? I mean, what is happening there? What was happening there? Can you delve a little bit into the sort of the events that led to Margarita making this journey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was one thing that I guess was a little shocking and disappointing, like learning how how ignorant I was, how much we don't know. Um, the way the immigration issue is being framed right now is, America first and us versus them. And I guess I learned that there's no part of Edgar and Margarita's life that the U.S. didn't already have a stamp on. I mean, they know all about the U.S. The presence looms very large, and we know as a country very little about Guatemala. So, yes, what I learned is specifically in Guatemala, the U.S. Orchestrated a coup of a democratically elected government, I think in 1953, um, and then funded decades of civil war, killing at least 200,000 civilians. So massive unrest that we were uh, an author in. Um, of thousands of refugees fled Guatemala for the United States, settling many of them in gang-plagued Los Angeles. Um, and the children of Salvadoran refugees and also other Central American refugees formed gangs partly for protection. The U.S. deported this problem whole scale back to Central America, where these gangs grew and overwhelmed local governments. Um, and that's just not, that's not again, we think of these gangs as these foreign gangs coming in, and that's just not the history. So yeah, I learned a lot, that Edgar in the play, speaks in Spanish and testifies in Spanish, but this is a deeply American story because there's no part of Edgar's life and death that we didn't have some kind of hand in.
Did you get any sense, Sulema, talking to Margarita, that she holds the U.S. complicit in what happened to her son?
I never asked her that, but I would venture to say that she doesn't. Margarita's a very simple woman. She's not very well educated. And what tends to happen with U.S. intervention in Latin America or anywhere else is that, the trickle down effect, we do feel that, right? So the people who are least educated, who have the least amount of resources, the ones that tend to pay the price for governments being destabilized. Um, I'm not sure that she would specifically say, oh, the US did A, B, and C, and therefore this was the result. She just knew that because of the situation in the country, she had no other recourse in order to be able to provide for her children. Um, the gang situation, did she know that they were exported from the US? I don't know. I don't get the sense that I mean, her life is so busy and so, like, raising her grandchildren now. I'm not sure that she has the kind of time to reflect on the bigger issues that, the macro as opposed to the micro right now. She's dealing with the loss of her children, having to raise very young grandchildren. So no, I don't know. I think that if she were to think about it, she might blame the US, but I don't think that that's something that really crosses her mind on a daily basis.
So, in other words, Jeff and Sulema, folks, the people that are making this journey are simply trying to survive, and they know that whatever their current reality is, it's so unendurable that they have to escape it. They have to go to a safer place, and that safer place is the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are, the US has had a hand in destabilizing almost every single Central and Latin American country. And in the Americas, it is the most stable country that there is, as a result, whatever one may think of that. So it is logical that people will, if they think that there's an opportunity here that is going to help them, send money back to their families or be able to, move ahead a little bit, then that, of course, that's what they're going to do. Um, it's a logical byproduct of what our foreign policy is.
So I want to ask you, Jeff, putting together this narrative, this story, how did you assemble it? What were the how do you take this raw material and put it together into a narrative that tells a story from beginning, middle, and to the end?
We had so much to work with, multiple viewpoints. So we've spoken about Margarita, but there was Edgar telling his own story, which you could trace through the what how he testified in court, in immigration court in Colorado, and his legal declaration, his sort of statement of fact, telling his own story. Um, and his letters, his mother, Margarita, when we interviewed her. I'm actually not a Spanish speaker, so I went to Los Angeles with the original actor who played Edgar, Jose Aranda, and Margarita came back with a shoebox with basically every piece of paper she had that had touched Edgar's life, and most poignantly, his letters written to her from first juvenile detention and then from immigration detention, where he was speaking to her, and I think begging for forgiveness for missteps, and really avowed of what he wanted with his life and how he wanted to change. And you can really see that the yearning for something different from this life that he had been involved in for so long, and for a different kind of future. So I think that his story we really tracked, but then, Kim's first, Kim is the lawyer. It was her first pro bono case, and we track her experience, and Edgar's gang counselor. Through all of these perspectives, you really get a very rich sense of this young person, who unfortunately we did not get to speak with directly, but I think we really tracked his journey. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer, and I'm not even sure I answered it. But even seemingly very dry documents like a psychiatric assessment, right? You've got to do that for an asylum case. In this case, to prove that Edgar was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, um, from the threats on his life, and the gang killing him and trying to kill him. And even there, even in this very legal or clinical document, there's a story about trauma from both the gang and from being detained in immigration detention indefinitely.
Sulema, can you talk to us just a little bit about what the journey is? You alluded to it. You said it's an incredibly hard, arduous journey that nobody would willingly do. Nobody would just say, I'm going to go to the United States, therefore I will do this incredibly arduous, life
Right.
risking thing. What is
Right.
involved in that journey?
Well, the first part is finding a coyote, which is someone who knows the routes to take in order to avoid immigration, both in Mexico and in the United States. Because you have to remember they're coming through Guatemala, right? So they're traveling through a couple of different countries to get here. And that, for example, when she bought Edgar over, it cost her $7,000, which is a pretty significant amount for someone who has, a job that, a regular paycheck. But for someone who's working odd jobs the way that Margarita was, it's very difficult to put together that kind of money. And she did that. And she did it for herself. And so then she has to put her trust into people that are sometimes not, a little bit unsavory, who knows, but in strangers, the trust in her life in the hands of strangers, to come through these different countries, sometimes by train, sometimes by foot. You go through a desert when you're coming through from Mexico to the States, so it's long. I'm not sure. I want to say, I could be wrong, but it took her to, I think, close to a week, maybe, to get here from where she was. And at every point, you are at risk of being discovered and deported back to your country. Women in particular are at risk of sexual violence. That happens very often. And so again, it is not a lighthearted trip. It's not like you can just get in your car and go and cross borders. You have to be constantly avoiding authorities, and it's a lot of people don't make it.
Jeff, you said that you had looked at countless stories before settling on this one. In what ways is this one emblematic of so many other stories?
The violence on the ground in Central America and the impact of the gangs is so widespread. And it can't be understated. Um, so many refugees have, as a matter of course, had to flee the violence. One of the things we did for the audio adaptation of the play that is different from the stage version is our hosts are new immigrant students from Pan American International High School in Queens, and really tell the story through and interpret the story for us through their own lens. And they did beautifully. Carlos and Georgina. It's really wonderful to be walked through the story through their lens. But Carlos, in particular, just like Edgar, had to flee El Salvador. In that case, it was with his mother, because the gangs were coming for him. It's so widespread, it's so bad. I mean, even in elementary school, he had kids saying like, "If you don't join the gang, I'm going to tell my parents, and they're going to come after you." And seeing murder in the street, he lost an uncle to the gang violence, and the mom was like, "We just have to get out of here." So that story is sadly, it's very typical. The grounds for asylum, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but um, the using the very real threat of gangs as an issue in asylum cases has become very difficult, next to impossible, to be used in the courts. But that doesn't eliminate the problem and the reason why so many have fled and are still fleeing.
Ask you one. I want to ask you both this question and in no particular order. But what do you tell people if you could? I'm thinking of folks who are supporting this mass deportation, right? Well, tough luck for them. Tough luck for the people like Edgar. We need to protect the citizens of this country from the people that are coming across our border and, committing crimes here. What's your response to them?
I mean, my initial response is, I think, and I'm not sure where I read these statistics, so the internet is not always reliable, but less than 1% of the people that have come across the border in I think in the past 4 or 5 years have been found to have a criminal record or are committing crimes in the States. We have a carceration problem here in the States with people that are wrongly incarcerated or wrongly accused of crimes. And we criminalize behavior that has more to do with poverty and lack of resources than actual criminal intent. So I think that would be the first thing that I would say. Second thing is, if you really want to stop the problem of deportation or of immigration or illegal immigration, let's look at our foreign policy. When the U.S. pulls its hands out of the coffers of other countries, and allows countries to have self-determination, then we can be more, we can have a higher expectation that people will want to stay home if they have autonomy in their own countries.
Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to that?
The whole scale simplification of the issue and the dehumanization, um, we must we must, as citizens of this country, and I guess I'm speaking from that angle, um, realize the power of our courts and to really commit to seeing folks as as human beings, particularly where our thumbprint as a nation is sort of has such a huge outsized impact on these lives.
Jeff, you told us a little bit about the history of the U.S. and its involvement in Guatemala going all the way back to the 50s and maybe even before. Do you know what the U.S.'s interest in Guatemala at that time was? Was it oil? Was it sugar? Was it plantations?
Bananas. Bitter Fruit is a nonfiction book covering the history of the U.S. orchestrated coup in Guatemala. Very powerful, very well documented. That basically the CIA cooperated with financial interests, namely the United Fruit Company, um, who is now Chiquita Banana, in overthrowing the democratically elected government.
And as you said, that led to the instability, that led to civil war, that led to a sort of a void in infrastructure and society crumbled to the point that gangs took over, violence became so intolerable, and there was so much poverty that people like Margarita had to escape.
Yeah, it was just an endless cycle
Cycle, yeah.
of migration and deportation. And as I mentioned, the root of the gangs most prevalent in Central America were both of those gangs, 18th Street and Mara Salvatrucha, were born on the streets of Los Angeles.
So, Lema, you alluded to less than 1%. You said you didn't have a source for that, but that it was a very small percentage of undocumented immigrants who commit crimes when they cross the border into the U.S. Can you tell us what you found?
Yeah, it's a National Institute of Justice funded study, which examined data from the Texas Department of Public Safety. And they determined the rate at which undocumented immigrants are arrested for committing crimes. So the study found that undocumented immigrants are at less than half the rate, or arrested, excuse me, at less than half the rate of native-born U.S. citizens for violent and drug crimes, and a quarter the rate of native-born citizens for property crimes. And so, to give you that in numbers, between 2012 and 2018, for every 100,000 persons, 1,000 U.S., maybe between 1,000 and 1,200 U.S. citizens would be arrested for those crimes. For documented immigrants, the number goes between 800 and 850. And for undocumented immigrants, it stays at about 400.
So I have a question and then a kind of a follow-up here, but I'll ask you first, Jeff. What do you hope people take away from the experience of hearing the podcast of Del Novo?
Thanks. Well, I hope folks listen. It really does work as a compelling drama. So we've been dealing with a lot of facts and figures and heavy history, but it really does work as a very compelling drama. So I would hope people would go to Houses on the Moon podcast and subscribe and listen to all three parts of De Novo, because there's an important story here. You hear it playing out. And this again, I think, is we're telling Edgar's story, but is we're learning is very typical that kids who are separated from their birth family or family of origin for some time and are reunited and thrust into a new culture like the United States, experience profound culture shock and alienation, and that plays out very powerfully in that Edgar really didn't spend any time with his mom, hardly at all, until he was 14 and had to flee Guatemala. And suddenly he's living in this new home in Los Angeles with half siblings that he's never known. And where does he, and in a place where where he's living in Los Angeles, he's literally has to run out the back door of the house to avoid gangs. where does this young man who's only grown up around gangs, where does he gravitate towards? And of course, in Los Angeles, it was getting involved in a gang again, which, I think in many ways he's sort of the poster child that Trump is screaming about, these evil gang members. But the story really humanizes him, and particularly, I think you get that in the scene where Edgar and his mom sort of have this standoff about his new homies, and perhaps we'll have a chance to listen to that.
Let's listen to it. We'll listen to it right now. This is the scene that you're describing.
I would scold him. I'm not gonna say I didn't. I would tell him. Deberías de irte a estudiar. You should go and study. But he picked his bad habits at school. Because when he started school, that's when he started talking about my homies this and 18th Street that. No quiero que hables de las pandillas con tus hermanos porque no quiero que estén en esas cosas. I told him not to talk about the gang with his brothers. I didn't want them to be on those things, but he never listened.
Ma, por favor, no es nada.
He got 18 tattooed on his arm. Edgar, ¿por qué te hiciste eso? He had a big one here and another there. I said, Edgar, why did you do that to yourself? Te va a causar problemas. You have everything here. Aquí, comida, ropa, zapatos, una casa. Food, clothes, shoes, a house. I don't know what you're looking for.
Edgar! Okay, I go now.
¿Pero a dónde vas?
Es que son mis amigos. My friends,
Pues no,
ma.
Edgar, no quiero que salgas esta
Por
noche.
favor,
no,
déjame.
Edgar, esto es mucho, es demasiado.
¿Qué
Esa gente
no
no te
hace
va a
nada?
traer
Son mis
nada.
amigos.
Edgar, no.
Si me vas a pegar, pégame. Go ahead, hit me.
Is there anything that exists besides this play, which is fantastic in the podcast? Is there anything else in Edgar's name?
Well, there's plenty of press still floating around. Edgar was murdered in 2004. This is the only dramatic treatment that I know of.
His sister did I mean, I don't know that it's available, but his younger sister actually, didn't she write a movie script that she presented at school? And I'm not sure, what I'm not sure that she had the means or the wherewithal to put it out to the public, but she did write a screenplay and did a small film about her brother.
Can I add that partnership and collaboration with communities and community groups is essential to the work we do? So one of the partners on this was Homies Unidos in Los Angeles, which is a gang intervention organization, a gang prevention organization that does really great work with young people transitioning out of gang life, young people who were kind of in Edgar's shoes. Edgar was in the process of having his tattoos removed, which Homies Unidos is also involved with, to really to really change, to grow, and to grow up, to be able to grow up and live in this society. And so Homies does great work. And in fact, if you listen to the podcast, a couple of former gang members who now work with Homies Unidos are actors in the piece portraying gang members in both Los Angeles and Guatemala.
That really leads to the question that I was going to ask as a follow-up, and I can ask you, Sulema, but what can people do now to help people like Margarita and others who are experiencing trauma and who may be at risk of being deported? Is there anything that either of you, we'll start with you, Sulema, can suggest for people who want to do something to be helpful to do?
There's actually a plethora of things that we can do, and if you go to housesonthemoon.org, there are organizations that can link to different organizations that either that are helping immigrants that are in the process of trying to legalize their status. But we've performed this show at law schools and for law students who have decided to do pro bono work for immigrant children. In the many people have the mistaken belief that you are entitled to a lawyer when you go into court, and that while that is true for U.S. citizens or people who are here with status in criminal court, it is not true for immigrants. So we have had children as young as 6 months going before a judge without legal representation. So if there are lawyers out there that have pro bono time, that would be a wonderful way to begin. We can also act as witnesses. Go to immigration court. The more people that are packing the court, the more the judge will feel that they're under a microscope, and maybe think a little bit harder about the decisions that they make. You can go to a lot of these organizations that are listed on Houses on the Moon. And if you have time, you can help people. If you're bilingual, for example, you can help people fill out paperwork, find resources that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise because of the language barrier. So things like that, and vote, vote with the with the presence of mind, knowing that, that our vote affects everyone, not just our bank account, not just our stock accounts. It's important to vote as a human.
Those are great words to end with. Zulema, thank you so much for all of that information. Jeff, anything you want to add in the way of what people can do right now to help people like Edgar's family or Edgar himself?
I'll come back to where I said as a U.S. citizen, which is, to have status is a privilege, and we're going to have to stay informed the next 4 years. I've just resubscribed to all my newspaper subscriptions. Like, we're going to have to be on this and to fight back the tide that's coming. And as part of that, I would hope you'd listen to the NOVO podcast, which is housed at Houses on the Moon. You can find Houses on the Moon on any of your major podcast platforms. Please listen and subscribe. And if you like it, maybe say something nice.
That's right. Listen, rate, review, subscribe. Oh, what a really just tragic subject to work on, but so incredibly important. I don't know about anybody listening, but the onslaught of misinformation that came up during the presidential campaign, I felt utterly powerless. Didn't know how to change the narrative, how to argue back with any kind of sense and sanguinity, if that's a word, to the friends that I have who grew up in rural Wisconsin, who were just absolutely propagandized into not having a clear picture of the truth. This is a way to start to take steps back towards sanity and a real comprehensive understanding of the sources of the challenges that we face when we talk about mass migration, mass deportation. I hope that you've either listened to the podcast or that you will now listen to episode 1 here on the Play On feed. Jeff and Zulema, it's been a real privilege to have you with us here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. It was great to be here with you. Really appreciate you listening.
You've been listening to the Play On podcast feed, produced by Next Chapter Podcasts. You can learn more on our website, nextchapterpodcasts.com, where you can find other Play On podcast series and interviews, along with talk podcasts like The 500, Our New South, Beef with Bridget Todd, Reimagining Us, and a whole lot more. I'd like to thank Jeremiah Tittle, the founder of Next Chapter Podcasts, and our producer, Pete Musto. Our audio engineer, editor, and sound designer is Justin Cortez. Be sure to subscribe to Next Chapter Podcast for updates on all the latest content, and don't forget to rate and review our shows. I'm Michael Goodfriend. My email address is michael@nextchapterpodcast.com. I look forward to sharing more incredible works with you here at Next Chapter Podcast.
Ready to launch your business? Get started with the commerce platform made for entrepreneurs. Shopify is specially designed to help you start, run, and grow your business with easy customizable themes that let you build your brand, marketing tools that get your products out there, and that's just the beginning. From startups to scale-ups, online, in person, and on the go. Shopify is made for entrepreneurs like you. Shopify, your all-in-one commerce platform.
Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com.au/listen.
Ready to launch your business? Get started with the commerce platform made for entrepreneurs. Shopify is specially designed to help you start, run, and grow your business with easy customizable themes that let you build your brand, marketing tools that get your products out there, integrated shipping solutions that actually save you time, from startups to scale-ups, online, in person, and on the go. Shopify is made for entrepreneurs like you.
Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/setup.
Next Chapter Podcasts.